Good morning. And hello, everyone at home online. Whether you're gathered here with us in this space and you've been here many times, or this is your very first time, or you haven't been here in a long time. Those of you joining us online, if this is your regular practice, we welcome you. If this is your first time in checking out a way of being with us in our spiritual gathering, we welcome you. In this mid-summer moment, we pause to sing and pray and reflect and let music have its way with us as we seek wisdom and courage to live with authenticity and faithfulness and integrity. We're continuing to explore the practice of pilgrimage, and today we consider our pilgrim journeys toward reconciliation, reconciling with all the versions of ourselves that we've been over the years, reconciling with the wounds of life and time, reconciling the ways we've wounded one another, and our collective responsibilities to Earth and to each other. We honor the soil beneath our feet wherever we are, whether we're here in this gathering space in South Edmonton, or wherever you find yourself as you join us online. The storied land we each call home, ancestral lands deep with memory and tradition. And we acknowledge the first peoples of the land. For those of us in the SSUC community in Saskatoon and in Edmonton, we make our home on the ancestral lands of Treaty 6 with Cree and Métis people who've called this land home for generations. So whatever our history or our heritage, whether we live in treaty territory or unceded land, we acknowledge our search for healing and our commitment to reconciling ways. If those of you at home have a candle at the ready, We invite you to join those of us here in this gathering space as we light our community candle, which we do each time we gather. To remember that we are born of light and born to honor and protect the light of light that is within each of us, within all of us. And with gratitude for our great day star that keeps us from ever darkness, and the lights of the night sky, which guided our ancestors and remain in their faithful consolations to help us find our way. And so we sing our way together. If we breathe, we pray, because even our breath is a prayer. Sometimes it's a prayer that is a sigh for what is and the way we wish the world were. And sometimes it's an inhale of something that takes our breath away and we can't begin to express our awe or our gratitude with words. We breathe a prayer together each time we gather as a way of strengthening our intentions to live more fully, more freely, more deeply, more truly human. And so I invite us to pray with one another as we center ourselves in this time and in this place together. We pause once again to get our bearings as we celebrate the abundance and beauty of this season. We are in awe of the resilience of life. As we face the wounds of our inhumanity, may we find better words and better ways to walk together. As we embrace paths of healing and reconciliation, we lean into our courage to trust and honor one another. May we live with hearts broken open to the pain and joy of our shared humanity. As those who share a common journey, may we find our way together. Amen. We take this time with Allison, one of our facilitators in the Emberwood SSUC Wild Sanctuary programs, and Allison will lead us in a Wild Sanctuary moment.
Hello. A part of reconciliation is coming to value other ways of being in the world. A Western perspective is only one way of knowing, one way of many ways of knowing. Yes, we can learn and come to know things through a linear, logical, rational way, and we could come to value knowing through visioning, circuitous imagining, waiting, intuiting, feeling, storytelling. Nature can help us bring balance to these ways of knowing. You can just ask nature. So, if you wish, you can picture a favorite tree or a favorite nature place, and we can just ask nature. So what does nature have to say about some of these norms of our Western society? So you can ask your tree or your spot, what do you have to say about perfectionism, valuing the written word, either or binary thinking? What would your tree have to say about individualism or objectivity? So perhaps asking nature could bring some balance, and we can learn a lot about what she might have to share. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Sherry Ann, and I have the honor to read a book called The Forgiveness Garden by Lauren Thompson with pictures by Christy Hale. There was a valley, and through the valley ran a stream. The village of Bayam stood on one side, and the village of Gamti stood on the other. There was no peace in the valley, for the two villages had hated each other for a long, long time. One day, a new argument sparked. Both villages claimed a certain part of the stream as their own. Angry words flew across the stream, then stones. A Gamti boy named Karune picked up a large stone and hurled it across the water. A Bayam girl named Sama stood where the stone fell. The stone hit Sama hard on the head, and she fell hard to the ground. The villagers of Bayam ran to help. The villagers of Gamti cheered and ran away. The Vayams called out for revenge. They were angry and they were afraid. Would the Gamtis never stop fighting us? They gathered around Sama, admiring her courage and plotting their revenge against the Gamtis. As days passed, Sama's pain began to lessen, but her hatred of the Gamtis grew. And in the village of Gamti, too, the people were angry and they were afraid. Would the Vayams fight us always? They gathered around Karune, praising his courage and scheming how to defend against the Vayams. Karune secretly wondered how brave he had truly been. But his hatred for the Vayams only grew. One day, Sama walked along the stream, yearning for something to ease her aching, angry heart. She reached a calm pool and bent to drink. What she saw reflected there stopped her. She saw the ugly scar, but most of all, she saw her own dark, brooding scowl. "Who have I become?" she cried. Sama wept for a long time. Then Sama looked across the stream. There, a few children from Gamti walked together. How scared and angry and sad they looked. Sama's heart softened. They are just like us, she thought. Suddenly, a few of Sama's own people ran up. "Here you are," they shouted. "The time for revenge has come," and they pulled her away to join the fight. Villagers from Vayam and Gamti crowded the stream. The Vayams held a captive. It was Karune, and they all held stones. A large stone was put into Sama's hands. It was the stone that Karune had thrown. "Throw the stone at him," her people hissed. "Throw it hard." Sama looked at all the villagers, those from Vayam and those from Gamti. Their faces were like hers had been, hardened with anger and fear and hate. Suddenly, Sama knew what she had to do. "No," she said in a clear, loud voice. "I won't hurt him. Let the boy go." Her people grumbled. Sama went on. "It's time to stop the fighting," she said. "We must stop hurting and hating." And she flung the large stone to the ground. "Let us build a garden instead," she said. Now all the people grumbled. Someone shouted, "What kind of garden?" Sama knew. "A forgiveness garden." Some people gasped, some scoffed, some just laughed. But some from Vayam murmured, "If Sama wants it." They let Karune go. Then they piled their stones near Sama's. Some from Gamti saw this and murmured, "It's worth a try." They added stones of their own. Only Karune hung back, scared, angry. Stone by stone, the people of the valley built a garden wall together, but they had questions. "If we forgive, must we forget all that has happened?" asked the villagers of Vayam. Sama answered, "We will sit together in the garden and decide." "Must we apologize?" asked the villagers of Gamti. "Will the Vayams apologize?" Sama answered, "The garden will help us find what is right." Still, Karune stayed apart, watching and thinking. Villagers set flowers into the soil and planted a tree. When the garden was complete, its loveliness made everyone smile. "This garden is for all of us," Sama said. "It can help us to put aside hate and learn what forgiveness feels like. Who will join me?" At first, no one moved. No one dared. The two villages had hated each other for a long, long time. It was hard to try a new way. Then Karune, brave Karune, stepped forward. I will join you, he said to Sama. Sama of Vayam and Karune of Gamti stepped into the garden together. They sat under the tree and they began to talk. What do you think? They said. This book has a point of reference. The Garden of Forgiveness is in Beirut, Lebanon, and is the vision of Alexandra Asili, a humanitarian, activist, and psychotherapist, who has declared that every act of revenge is a time bomb thrown into the future. The garden was created in the aftermath of a civil war that claimed 300,000 lives between 1985 and the year 2000. That garden, in 2005, was part of the experience of Reverend Lyndon Harris, who in 2005 was privileged to take family members who had lost loved ones in the tragic events of 9/11 in New York City. Together they planted an olive tree for peace in the Garden of Forgiveness. And standing there on that hallowed ground, together they pledged to bring Alexandra's vision to New York and to the world. As Archbishop Desmond Tutu has said, there is no future without forgiveness.
Thanks so much, Sherry Ann. Our Kids Spirit program, which is our learning activity program for children, runs from September through May, and we'll be back again in the fall. During our summer months, we have an activity table here at the back, and children are welcome to participate in those activities if you choose, or to stay in the circle with us.
I keep pulling it out, the old map of my inner path. I squint closely at it, trying to see some hidden road that maybe I've missed, but there's nothing there now except some well-traveled paths. They have seen my footsteps often, held my laughter, caught my tears. I keep going over the old map, but now the roads lead nowhere, a meaningless wilderness where life is dull and futile. Toss away the old map, she says. You must be kidding, I reply. She looks at me with Sarah eyes and repeats, toss it away. It's of no use where you're going. I have to have a map, I cry, even if it takes me nowhere. I can't be without direction. But you are without direction, she says. So why not let go, be free? So there I am, tossing away the old map, sadly, fearfully, putting it behind me. Whatever will I do, wails my security. Trust me, says my midlife soul. No map, no specific directions, no this way ahead or take a left. How will I know where to go? How will I find my way? No map. But then my midlife soul whispers, there was a time before maps when pilgrims traveled by the stars. It is time for the pilgrim in me to travel in the dark, to learn to read the stars that shine in my soul. I will walk deeper into the dark of my night. I will wait for the stars, trust their guidance, and let their light be enough for me.
We've heard that phrase, pilgrimage of penance, countless times this week. It was how Pope Francis chose to name his journey to Canada, to further address the Roman Catholic Church's role in operating Indian residential schools. If we've learned anything from the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the earlier apologies in the 1980s and the 1990s of the United Church, the Presbyterian Church, the Anglican Church, for all of our roles in this shameful and painful legacy, together with the papal apology, if we've learned anything, we've learned that reconciliation takes generations. It's a road, not a step. It's a journey without maps, but with many stars to guide us. It's a pilgrimage that might begin in words, but it certainly can't end in words. And maybe it's the nature of pilgrimage itself. If you think about travel, travel can be informative, it can be educational, it can be interesting, it can be entertaining. But a pilgrimage isn't informative, it's transformative. Pilgrimages start because we seek something we're missing, or something we've lost, or something we've never had. Its engine is quest. And we know from all the stories of pilgrimage, it always involves ordeal and losing one's way and making a path, not just following a map. And if we think of the pilgrimages we know best, they're never just a walk in the park or a stroll on the beach. They always require discomfort and rigor and effort, even pain. To ascend Mount Sinai, as pilgrims from all over the world do every day and every night, you either take the longer, slower ascent that camels can manage much of, or you take the steeper, more direct route of 3,750 steps of repentance from the southeast corner of St. Catherine's Monastery to the summit. But whichever way you go, you don't get to the summit without navigating those final 750 steps of repentance. All 3,750 of which were laid by a monk as a form of penance. And who has traveled the Camino de Santiago without blisters? Without experiencing the elements in searing heat or pounding rain? And by whichever of the many routes, who has made that pilgrimage without losing the path from time to time? So whether to Sinai or Mecca or Santiago or Lac Saint Anne, or the pilgrimages that we each make every day, trying to live in right relationship with earth and each other, there are times that we have to make our way individually and collectively up the steps of regret and over rivers of pain to right a wrong or mend a fence, forgive ourselves or another, seek healing and reconciliation. I think that's why I return again and again to the archetypal story of Jacob in the Hebrew Bible, because the story invites us to join him on a pilgrimage toward reconciliation. the way his story comes down to us is not one of those stories of broken relationship where there's more than enough blame to go around. His story is one of those stories when the harm has been done by one to another, where there's a guilty party and there's a victim. So it's not a story about finding middle ground or mutual forgiveness. Jacob caused the harm, and his brother Esau suffered the harm. And that's not even to begin to mention the heartbreak that Jacob's actions brought to his father. He'd lied, cheated, and deceived those nearest and dearest to him. He'd stolen the only things of real value in the ancient world. He had masqueraded as his slightly older twin brother, and then tricked his blind father into giving him the birthright and the blessing that belonged to the firstborn son. And then for the next 30 years, Jacob ghosted his duped father and his betrayed brother, and he disappeared to the ancestral lands of his grandparents, Abraham and Sarah. One of the stories we know best about him is about a mystical dark night of his soul, where he wrestles with a stranger on the final leg of his journey home before he attempted to reconcile with his brother. He struggles with one who is stronger than he is, who leaves him with a gait that's marked by a limp. And he emerges from that sleepless night, limping into the daylight toward the brother he had deeply wounded. From our front row seat on the storyline, it's very easy to critique his pilgrimage of penance. He had tried to pave his way to a good reception with his wounded brother by sending his family of wives and children on ahead of him, softening up his brother. And if that wasn't enough, he sent along hired hands with a down payment of sheep and camels and whatever he had, which was either a blatant bribe or a generous hospitality gift, depending on how you see it. All for a brother that he had cheated out of everything. It strikes me that Jacob could have benefited from the wisdom of a 12-step program. The wisdom of what has become a well-traveled spiritual path toward healing from the grip of addiction. Because not only do those steps toward healing require honesty and humility, but they also demand a moral inventory that leads to admitting the hurt and the harm that you've caused. Step 4. But it doesn't end there. Because beyond admissions and apologies, healing requires reconciling with oneself and making amends to others. Taking responsibility for what's needed. To mend, to heal, to attempt to make restitution, to address the harm. That's the long pilgrimage beyond every apology. Penance isn't a moment of a crafted apology, but a process to re-earn trust. It isn't simply a confession, but actions that turn regret to restitution, to living in ways that address the harm and create the conditions that make healing more possible. The story we're given in our tradition is a story told from the perspective of the dominant character, It's Jacob's story, the way it comes down to us. And he's the one who held all the cards and all the power. But reconciliation isn't up to Jacob. It's Esau we look to, the brother who was victimized. He's the one to determine what restitution needs to look like, what it would mean for Jacob to address the harm he experienced in a way that would take these brothers forward on a healing road. I don't know about you, but the voices I've wanted to hear this week during the pilgrimage of penance are the voices of those who were victimized by the policies and the practices of our government and our churches. Those in the position of Esau. Those indigenous of our land, whose land and communities and families and spiritualities, whose bodies and minds and spirits were harmed. We know there are many different perspectives on the papal pilgrimage of penance. Many perspectives among indigenous people, and no one speaks for all. But I want to share one voice with us this morning, the voice of a Cree man from Treaty 8 territory, an Anglican priest who is the Director of Indigenous Studies at Vancouver School of Theology. This is part of a considered response given by the Reverend Dr. Ray Eldred.
Support groups for people who have suffered abuse. Tell us about the significance of this part of the papal tour to Lac Sainte Anne.
Well, my mother actually attended that pilgrimage when she was little. She was born up by Lesser Slave Lake. And for people, particularly for Indigenous people who belong to the Roman Catholic Church, it's significant because earlier today, when the apology was made, there was a admission on the part of the head of the Catholic Church that the Catholic Church was wrong and that Indigenous people were right to fight for their culture, and that there's been a huge wrong done. And I think the people there want, the reason that you go to Lac Sainte Anne is because you're seeking healing. And I think that this will provide for a sign of hope. And for many, I think they're hoping that healing would continue in their communities. So I think that's what they're hoping for. They're probably hoping that it'll be the beginning of something. The Catholic Church has waited a long time to do things that other churches in Canada started doing in the 80s and 90s. So I imagine that's what folks are thinking about, maybe find some healing.
Reverend, let's talk a little bit about what happened earlier today. The Pope held a huge mass at Commonwealth Stadium, and he's being criticized because he made no mention of the apology that he made yesterday or of the people who were harmed by the residential school system. Many people are saying that his mass missed the mark. How do you feel about that?
Well, I listened to the mass and I watched the text, or I read the text. I think those are legitimate concerns. I think that people would have liked to see the institutional Catholic Church go further, but I don't think it will. Just the nature of how the Catholic Church in Canada has resisted all along going as far as Indigenous people would like them to go. At the same time, I don't want to sort of cast unfavorable light on Indigenous people who view this as a positive thing that's happening. So, but I think when Justice Murray Sinclair criticizes the Pope for not going far enough, though, that's legitimate. That's legitimate. You know, among the Cree in northern Alberta, the idea of an apology is that you make amends. So if amends are made, then you could say that an apology has been made. Up to that point, right now, they're words. They're powerful words from a powerful position in a powerful church, but we'll see what happens.
Reverend, it's been 17 years since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission asked the Pope to issue an apology in Canada for the Church's role in residential schools. And while, as you say, the Pope went further in his apology than any of his predecessors, many say not far enough. As you mentioned, National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, Roseanne Archibald, was not impressed. The Pope did not address revoking the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery goes back, well, to the 15th century. Can you shed a little bit of light on what the doctrine of discovery is about?
Well, when the Spanish came into parts of the West Indies and South America, they had to legitimate them taking land from Indigenous people. So the then Pope issued these two papal bulls basically saying that if Christians discovered lands, or what they thought was discovering, these lands that if they were not Christian people and would not convert, then Spain was justified in taking the land from Indigenous people. And then that continued. Other countries, Canada and the United States, basically they said that Indigenous people weren't real peoples. They were just sort of individuals who were living out in a basically empty land, and they used that to justify taking land. And that's kind of, those things just built on one after another. It's not like the Catholic Church had a doctrine that was called the doctrine of discovery. But I think it goes, in those days, they believed that because God had made everything and they served the Christian God, that legitimated them taking land from people who weren't part of the church.
Mm-hmm. Reverend, I'd like to touch on another point that you brought up, the Pope being criticized for not apologizing on behalf of the Catholic Church as an entity, but for members of the Catholic Church. And there are several opinions as to why he would do that. What is your take on that?
The church, when teaching, is infallible, so the Catholic Church believes. And so then the church was not going to apologize as an institution. It'll apologize for those who were part of the church but who did evil things. They'll say that those things are wrong, but they won't apologize for the church itself as a whole, even though it's clear from history that it was part and parcel of the colonial enterprise that came to the New World, or to what they thought was the New World. And so they're not going to apologize as an institution, because then that would mean that would sort of go against a critical doctrine in the Catholic Church, that the church, when teaching, is infallible.
One of the most painful legacies of the Catholic and Anglican residential school system in Canada was, of course, the sexual abuse of children. That was not mentioned in the Pope's apology yesterday.
Yeah, that's regrettable. That's regrettable. I don't know why he didn't. Maybe he was concerned he would trigger people if he did that. There might be good reasons why he didn't, but we certainly have heard people say, what are the bad reasons that he didn't? But it would have been, I think it would have been a significant thing for him to say that. But then again, you know, it gets into, there's a lot of bureaucratic machinery behind the Catholic Church. So, but I still think he went as far as he could. But it would have been good for him just to say that the sexual abuse was wrong. Although maybe that's what he meant with the word evil, the evil that was committed.
Reverend, what does this pilgrimage of penitence lead to?
Well, that's the thing, right? If there's not restitution, and so far the Catholic Church has lagged behind the other mainline denominations for making good on promises they said they were going to make, to have a fund to help support people who were trying to heal from the generational trauma. You know, that's 7 generations of Indigenous people that were subjected to abuse in the residential school. Maybe the Catholic Church continues to struggle to believe that the whole system was wrong. The whole system of residential school was wrong. Maybe they think that just the abuse was wrong. But the government's approach, and you have to lay the lion's share of the blame on the government. The government used the Catholic Church and other churches to implement a program of resocialization that was aimed at, I think it was Ward Churchill said, to destroy the savage and save the child. And it was awful. It was awful. And I think hopefully the Pope is doing penance will also lead to restoration and to try to actually come together with Indigenous people to try to heal the land. But again, we'll have to wait and see what happens. And
we know that Indigenous communities are not a monolith in this country, and there are many opinions, and there will be many, many reactions to the Pope's visit here. And we thank you very much for your time today and for your positivity. You leave us feeling hopeful. Thank you.
All right.
Reverend Dr. Ray Aldred, Director of Indigenous Studies Program at the Vancouver School of Theology.
So isn't it time for the limping pilgrim in you and me to travel in the dark without a map and learn to read the stars that will shine in our souls as we walk deeper into that starlit night toward reconciliation? An invitation for those of you joining us at home online, an opportunity to gather on Zoom and have conversation with one another to go a little deeper regarding our theme today, to share your insights with each other on the whole journey toward reconciliation. You'll find the Zoom link on our website. We invite you to join this conversation hosted by Nell Owens. On Saturday, we invite you to join with Al Craig's family to celebrate his life here at SSUC. You can join us online or here in this space in person at 1 o'clock. And in honor of Al, you're welcome to wear a golf shirt. One of the wonderful resources we have here in our SSUC community is a well-curated library that has been maintained and updated and by Ken and Ellen Fredericks. You'll find it just off of our foyer in the lounge. And there are a number of wonderful resources, particularly about truth and reconciliation, and all kinds of different topics. The books are all cataloged by author and by title, so we invite you to make use of that resource that we have available to us. Allison's going to come and share a few updates and invitations for us as well.
Hello again. Camp Dragonfly, our camp for your camp for trans and gender creative kids, is coming up right away, August 12 to 14. So I wanted to let you know that the first year it was in person, we had 20. The next year we had 40. We already have over 70 kids signed up. Yay. So, yeah, if you would like to come to the community dinner on the Sunday, just let us know how many you're bringing. That's open to everybody if you want to check it out, but you're perhaps a little too old. If you're not 6 years old to 13 years old. We could also use a little bit of help at that meal or at all the meals if you want to get in on some kitchen work for the weekend. We could also use a photographer, another psychologist. If you know someone to recommend, send them off to camp-dragonfly.com or let the office know and they'll tell me. I also wanted to tell you that for our Your Nature offerings for the fall with Emberwood and with SSUC together in collaboration, we've got those posted online now at emberwood.ca. So importantly, there's Forest Families, the program that you ran every Saturday for kids outside, families, grandparents, aunts, uncles. That's going again, but more regularly. So you can already sign up for the fall now for Forest Families and our retreats as well. So it would be great to see some registrations for the fall come in August so that we kind of have a sense of what our fall is going to look like. So I'll be happy to answer any questions about that, and I'm excited for all of it. Thanks.
Next Sunday, we have the opportunity online to celebrate and welcome the new moderator of the United Church of Canada, Reverend Dr. Carmen Lansdowne, the very first Indigenous woman to lead the United Church of Canada. We'll place a link in the messenger this week so we can join at Canadian Memorial United Church in Vancouver as we install Carmen as our new moderator for the next 3 years. We take this opportunity to sing our commitment with one another in words that my teammate Christopher New has given us. We look forward to Chris's return next Sunday, and we sing these words that have been inspired by the values that hang on our wall here each week, values that were embraced and adopted by our SSUC family in Saskatoon when they were Meewasin Valley United Church. We sing with one another. Imagine what could happen if we went looking for the light in one another. That's our journey of possibility. That's the pilgrimage toward reconciliation. And so we go to be light for and with one another, to seek light in and with one another, to find the light in all the others. We go in peace and hope, with love and grace and courage.